background is I'm a corporate trainer, I'm a management consultant specializing in the area of game design and simulation. So I build games, I build simulations, and I just like the idea of concept of playing games. And today we are in a totally different kind of environment. We are here in a virtual way. If this was a live session, I would have given you the games and for you to try out. But I'm still going to give you some activity to try out. So what I need you to do is, before we begin, I need you to have a piece of paper that looks like this. It's like a 3 inch by 2 inch. You don't have to have a white paper. You could try it out in a newspaper. Just tear off a piece from the newspaper. It doesn't have to be perfect, like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just like a 3 by 2 kind of paper. Just have them ready, and we're going to be playing some activity. Let's just have a little bit of fun if we like. Okay. So today we're going to be talking on this topic. It's a very important thing. It's about perspectives. It's about perspectives. And if we change our perspective, we can rethink our action and therefore transform our results. So talk about perspective. There's always this perspective about how we view things, how we look at things, and how we perceive our environment here. So I want to play a game with you. Are you all ready to play with me? Now just come on, just play. Just take a few minutes of your time. Now, if you are driving, please pull to the side before you try this. Otherwise, you can watch this later. Okay, I'm going to put it on the slide and see if you could have a look at this image over here. Now, once again, no cheating, no checking YouTube, no checking on Google. Just look at the slide that I've just shared over there. And now that's like a standing paper. Okay, and I have a live version in front here. If your screen, you could still see the smaller version of me there. This is how the paper would look like. Okay, this is how it will look like. I'll turn it around, and this is how it will possibly look like. Okay, now look at the screen. What I want you to do is, using this paper here, I want you to recreate that object that you can see on the screen. You don't need a scissors. Just use a paper, tear it in whichever way you want, and recreate that standing paper. Okay, let's try that out. Let's give it a shot. That's right. Yes, sir. You got that right. Okay, try it. Have a look. Look at the paper. And if you have any question, if that is a single paper or two pieces of paper, let me just tell you, that's one piece of paper. You don't need a stapler. You don't need a glue. You can just take one piece of paper and try that out. How could you make this paper stand in the manner that you can see on that screen? Try it. Tear a piece and have a look at how you can create the same thing. Right? No cheating, okay? Don't check Google yet. You can do that later. I'll give you about a minute. It's one single sheet of paper. No glues needed. Nope, no, you don't need glues for that. You don't need a stapler. You just need one sheet of paper and recreate that object that you can see on the screen. Credit goes to a friend of mine who shared this game with me. Her name is Teo Po Yu. She is based in Malaysia, and I'm from beautiful and peaceful Malaysia as well. She's a school teacher, was a school teacher, and she's an amazing lady where you use maths and magic. And when I first saw this activity, I thought to myself, how in the world do you do it? It takes a little bit of effort. It allows us to think differently. Okay, now I'm going to give you the solution part of that, all right? So I've given enough time for you to have a look. Perhaps you can try this later. Come back about a few hours later and watch it and try it on your own, okay? So this is how it looks like, okay? This is how it looks like. If you notice, it's just a single piece of paper. Now, the question people always ask is that, well, if something is standing up here, it must have been cut off from here. But then, okay, I can explain this part, but I can't explain this part. And then you flip it the other way around. It's the same thing. If it's cut over here, well, I can explain this part, but how do I explain this part? The thing is this. We are not looking at the same surface. Our mind always assumes that whenever we look at this is actually one single surface. And because it's one single surface, we are just wondering how in the world can this happen on that same surface? Here's the trick. Are you ready? I'm going to flip this. Now you see it? It's actually one piece of paper, but the trick is not to make this stand up, but the trick is actually look at one side of it, flip this. Now it looks like it's standing on top. And the flip is what we call as perspectives. Today we're going to talk about perspectives. This is a very sensitive topic. And I hope I don't get shot by any of the men or women out there, but I'm going to talk from a perspective where it's about equality, of how men and women have to respect one another. The goal of women empowerment should no longer just be about women helping women. It should be about men and women working together. So before we go into that, let's just go through history a little bit. I love history. If you learn history, it gives you a perspective of what is happening in reality. Where did this whole thing about female empowerment, fighting for female rights all came about and all? So for that, let's just go back a couple of 100 years or even 1,000 years. You see, at one point, male and female were differentiated biologically. And even until today, we are different biologically. We are equal, but at the same time, we are not equal. All right, we have different perspectives. We have different body shapes. We have different biological conditions on operation, which is totally different. Now, because of that, the nature of work that was done back then relied heavily on the physical ability of a person. So, if you are a man, you are strong, able body, and you had to do the brute work, the brute force work that involved brute force. And therefore, the ladies who are maybe not physically as strong as men were doing the lighter force work. They were doing the a little bit more easier to do work. And that is how things went on. And it was very peaceful. Everything went on that way. And then something happened. Industrial Revolution came about. When Industrial Revolution came, we found machines were able to do the work that an average man can do. Let's take, for example, you all know Andrea. And Andrea is this very nice. I mean, she's so sweet. She's so sweet, so gentle. Handshaking with her, just a handshake. I just felt like I should not press it too hard. You know, she's so fragile in that sense. But behind this gentleness, if I were to give her an AK-47 and ask Andrea, could you use your gentle fingers and pull the trigger of the AK-47? Now, my question is, will the bullet travel slower because a woman pulled the trigger? No, the bullet will travel as fast as what it's been designed for. The gun will fire the way it has been designed for. It doesn't matter whether a woman pulls the trigger or a man pulls the trigger. Even a child can pull the trigger, which we have seen that many times, and he can create the same amount of damage. Why? You can even give it to a monkey, and even a monkey pulls the trigger, it will create the same kind of damage. So what has happened is, during the Industrial Revolution, machines started coming into our society. And because of that, what was once a brute force work could now be done by either gender, because it's about pressing buttons, it's about pulling a particular lever, where both parties could actually do that. And if you look at it about 100 years ago, 150 years ago, not only female were working in factories, children were working in factories. The concept of child labor came very much later. If you look at Europe in the beginning, children used to work in the factory, but there was a problem with children working in the factory. They did not have the necessary dexterity. They did not have the necessary ability to handle. So what happened is they started getting injured. All right, so it didn't work. Okay, we'll take off that paper slides for a while. So don't concentrate on the paper thing now, all right? You can do that later, right? So what happened was, because of this industrial revolution that actually took place, the ladies could do the job as much as a man could do it. Now, where did this lead to? It led to women taking a forefront in the economy. So because women took the forefront in the economy, they started demanding for equal opportunity. And if you see, historically, there were even nations where women don't vote. Only men vote for election. And even that was turned around through a revolution among women. They created a revolution to ensure that women could vote as well. And when you look at all this, there is a very interesting book. The title of the book is Destined for War by Graham Allison. The book talks about superpowers. You know, if you have a one major superpower and you have an upcoming power, what will happen is that the superpower that is already in place will feel threatened, and they will find ways to suppress the other party to the point where they will still remain over there as their superior spot. And if you look at nations today, that's what's happening. If you talk about China and US and all, that's what's happening over there. But that's about nation. How is it related to men and women? Well, nations are run by humans. Humans are all psychology. You know, it's just a cumulative psychology of many people. So how is this happening in this real world? Is that as women start coming into the workplace, as they come and do equally good as much as men, there is some level of threat that has taken place among the men. Therefore, that explains all the suppression that used to happen historically. But today, we are coming into a more level playing field. Things are so much more different. However, certain narratives have not changed. Certain narrative where we still have to go against men in order to get our rights, it's still happening over there. Now, I agree. In some parts of the world, that's happening. Well, when it comes to abuse, I don't think you should be giving in for that. So there are certain things that we need to fight. But however, if we keep going on the same narrative, where is the next step of women empowerment? So what is the next step of women empowerment? The next step of women empowerment is how men and women can actually work together. But this working together is not going to happen magically. Because for all the reasons that I told earlier, that factor of threat and that factor of competition will always be there, will still be there. But the purpose is for us to understand what has happened. Because when we understand what has happened, we can take the step forward in a much more matured manner. So let's have a look at what we can do. The question right now is, how do we move forward? Now, my job as a trainer, as a corporate learning personnel is that I speak a lot on collaboration. My life is all about collaboration, and I found value in collaboration. One thing is, whenever we collaborate, a lot of magical things can happen. I mean, this conference is one good example of it. Thank you very much, Andrea, and all the team of experts have come together. When we collaborate, we can create magic. So, but there is a science to this collaboration. How do we collaborate intelligently? How do we collaborate in a way that it helps one another? So let's just have a look at the slides here. We call this 5 level of professional relationship. Now, the 5 level of professional relationship is, or we call it the 5C. There's 5 levels of how we build professional relationship, and they all take a certain step, and there's a certain requirement to that. Now, the first thing is, whenever you talk about collaboration or people coming together, is content. You will never collaborate with someone when there's no subject matter, or there's no task, or there's no mission for us to come together. Like this conference, the conference itself is the content, the avenue, the job, the project that you're involved in. So when it comes to those kind of things, you need some base on why you're going to collaborate. But this is always given, okay? This part is always given, because otherwise, why are you even talking to one another? But let's go to the next step. The next one is what we call as comfort. See, for us to collaborate, for us to work together, we need to build that level of comfort with one another. And the key to building comfort is what we call as respect. Now, respect is an easily said word, but either it's not really understood or we are oblivious to it because the word is just so commonly heard. What do you mean by respect here? One of the things we need to do as we collaborate between male and female is that both genders need to learn how to respect one another. That means one of the things that we need to stop is the name calling. We should just stop doing this name calling towards one another. When men have certain label on women, or women are all like this, lady drivers are like this, or all wives are like this. These are what we call as labels. But you know what? It's not just men who's putting the labels. Women are also having that kind of labels. Men cannot be trusted, or you better be careful with all men. Men are all very different. So now I'm not saying that every one of us are doing like that, but there are pockets of places where this kind of things happen. And if we don't have the respect with one another, we cannot move forward. So the first thing that we want to do is that how is that we can actually respect one another? We must start seeing each other as humans, as equal, and give them the due respect. So there should not be any form of name calling or any form of labeling of anybody out there. And that goes with both gender. Now, what's the next level? The next level is connection. Once we have a comfort, I'm working with you, I'm comfortable working with you, then the next step is I want to build a connection with you. Now, what do you mean by connection from a professional sense is that we need to find a common ground. We need to have an avenue where we find what is that we agree with one another. Now, you know what? We are going to disagree with so many things. That's fine. It's all right. We don't have to agree on so many things. If you're married, husband and wife, you don't agree with so many things, but you look for the point of agreement. Even when you work with kids, you talk about empowering kids today, is that there are so many things, and even today, it's even more difficult because kids are coming up with all kinds of ideas. Now, I come from an Asian background in Malaysia, and I come from an environment where my dad used to use the cane. And that's still legal in some parts of this region. But my kids are grown up in a totally different environment. Their exposures are totally different. So one is we're going to have a generation gap. And the generation gap is going to be even stronger than the kind of generation gap that I face with my dad. But there's a lot of difference. But what are the common grounds that we can agree with? There are some elements of values that we can agree with. Some outcomes of a project that we can agree with, or we can look at a rapport factor, certain likings with one another, and that is something that is going to be crucial for us to build a culture of collaboration between people. And this also applies not even between male to female, but even to anybody. If you're working on a project, you're working in a team, you're working in a company and all. What's the next one? The next step is what we call as confidence. Now, confidence is a very, very important bit. Confidence is the fact that I can turn my back around and I know that nothing wrong will go wrong. And when it comes to confidence, there's two elements of confidence we need to understand. One is competency. If you want to be given the empowerment, you need to prove your competency. And happy to say that in many aspects around the world, ladies have actually stepped up on this. They have proven their competency. I mean, look at it. We have had the CEO of Pepsi Cola, the former CEO of Pepsi Cola, was a lady. Hewlett Packard, lady. If you look at nations, even around the world, the British colony had a lady prime minister. In New Zealand, we have a lady prime minister. Even in the most a country that you would consider to be very, conservative, very traditional, like Pakistan and Bangladesh, have experienced a head of state, which is a lady. Why? Because they just proved themselves. They just proved that they have the competency to do it, and they got it. We are still waiting for America to catch up in this area, right? So we are hoping to see an American president who is a lady soon. Maybe not that soon, but one day. So as long as you have the competency, you have given people enough confidence. But there's another part of element of confidence, which is how you build trust. So trust comes from two factors. One is the fact that you have the competency, but second is that can we be fair on how we deal with one another? One thing we need to agree when you talk about genders coming together and genders working together, we should be fair regardless of what the gender is. There should not be favoritism based on gender. I mean, it's okay for us to champion a gender factor inside there, but when it comes to us moving forward, we need to give equal opportunity to both genders. That means if we are going to scrutinize somebody, if that means we are going to pinpoint a particular error, we should not be choosing based on their gender. Let's take, for example, um, let's say I'm going to talk about a very sensitive example. A man was having an affair with another woman. Now, general notion is always the focus will be on the man. Oh, he's married. He has kids. How could he do something like that? But there's very little attention on the woman who he has been having an affair with. The focus of woman will always be the victim woman and not the perpetrator of that. Now, the person who actually had an affair, in most cases, they know that they are married. They know that they actually have a family. But yet, why did they choose to have an affair with a man who is married? But when it comes to the spectators, I call them, who is giving comments on social media, the focus is always negative towards the men and pitiful for the victim, but no one says about that person. And that is why we never know about who this person is. In fact, you have celebrities, you have probably heard stories, celebrities who had an affair with 8 women or 12 women and all, comes out in the media and everyone is all about looking into this one celebrity. Why is he doing something like that? But no one questioned the 8 people who was involved in. Now, I'm not trying to pick on women here, but what I want to do is that I think we need to have the fairness factor. When you talk of male, female, we need to be fair with one another. So if we are going to scrutinize a man for something like that, we should be equally objective. We should be equally fair with the women as well. So that's how we can build trust. Because when that happens, when we put a female on a higher position in an organization or on a project and all that, everyone has a confidence that the person will act in a just manner. And that element of trust is one of the most difficult for us to achieve. And finally, the last step is what we call as collaboration. Collaborate. And for collaboration, this is what we call as a symbiosis. Now, symbiosis comes from a scientific term. What is symbiosis? If you look at plant that grows on another plant, another tree, that plant provides some good for the bigger tree, and the bigger tree provides something good for this particular plant. In an animal kingdom, if you have a cow, or in Malaysia we have a lot of bull over here, or what do you call that? Yeah, I think it was a bull. That's the right way. In Malaysia we call it kerbau. Okay, so there will be birds that will be sitting on it and will start eating the ticks on that. I know it's a bit of a gross example, but that's what happens. So what happens is the bird gets the food, the cow gets clean, and that's what we call a symbiotic relationship. And throughout nature, you find that symbiosis is actually a normal thing. You find that it's something that really, that's the reason why the species actually manage to survive. But what is the symbiosis in our context as a human? Okay? The symbiosis as a human is that we need to be a little bit vulnerable, for men to be a bit vulnerable, allow the vulnerability to say that, you know what, I could not have done without that lady doing it for me. And the lady being a little vulnerable to say that, you know what, my success is because that man helped me. I mean, there are women who helped me, that man helped me. We need to find what are the gaps that we can actually fill in for one another. The reality is this: we are all different. We are different. Not just gender, but we are different as personalities as well. And the reason why we are different is because that's where the beauty is. If you look at a coral, In Malaysia, there is a very beautiful coral reefs in Sabah, which you can, once the lockdown is over, I hope we'll return to some level of normality. You should go to those kind of islands in Sipadan and Manukan Island and all, and you should go and look at the corals. Whenever you look at the corals, they are all very different. They are different color, they are different shape, they are different contours. Some are solid, some are soft, but they are all different. Have you ever seen corals that all look the same? There is another place in Malaysia you can go and find corals that look the same. It's a beach called Mersing. Okay, it's a beach in the east coast of the peninsula, and you will find corals that all look the same. They are all white. You know what are they? Dead corals. Dead corals look the same. But corals that are alive, they are never the same. But when you look at the whole piece of coral, the seabed, what gives beauty to the seabed is that diversity that we have, is that diversity of seeing things so different with one another. And I think moving forward, as male and female, when we talk about gender, when we talk about empowerment, we need to find ways on how we could include each other. We need to find ways on how we can work with one another. So in summary, these are the 5 steps here. The first step is given. The second step is actually on comfort. Comfort requires respect. Let's respect one another. Connection. Let's find a common ground where we could agree on certain things. We may disagree on something, that's okay. That's what gives the color, let's say, what I mentioned just now. And the next part is actually on confidence. So when you talk about confidence, we want to have the trust. I want to trust a woman as much as I trust a man. For a woman, they should be able to trust a woman as much as they trust a man. And that trust comes from competency, ability to do something. But secondly is fairness. We need to treat one another fairly. And the last part is actually to achieve that thing called collaboration, where we live in a symbiotic relationship, where we know, and we are authentic to say that I need you. And for the other party to say, you know what, I need you too. And that is what we mean by the 5 levels of professional relationship. And anytime you find that if collaboration did not work, very simple, just go down the pyramid. Somewhere we failed in some area. Whenever you look, even in an organization, as a team, if you're working in teams, even if the same gender, whenever you can't collaborate, maybe some level of comfort was being affected. Maybe some connection was broken. Maybe some level of confidence was not built over there. And if we can look back there, and I believe we can really create a very collaborative spirit. And this is something which is not new. What I'm telling you is not my idea that I've just figured out or what. If you look at ancient history has always stated that male and female should be collaborative. Go to ancient India, and look at the sculptures that was built about 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. We always had the concept of male god and female god. And you go back to the Egyptian culture, they always had this male deity and the female deity. Now, whether they are god or not, that's not even the point of the discussion. But the point of discussion here is that even in the ancient times, the message that they gave us was, even at that level, they saw participation of male and female as equal. So moving forward, as we move through this change, as we move through new boundaries, we are pushing on new boundaries, we need to start looking at how can we work together, because I need you and you need me too. Right. Thank you for joining us.
Hi everyone, hope you are doing well. I really love this session. I think all the points what he mentioned was very, very important. So connection, confidence, collaboration, respect, mission, all of them are really important. This summit wouldn't have born if I wouldn't have gone through all these lists and all the points that Jega mentioned. So I'm really thankful for him. It's really nice to have these kind of experts who are really sharing true value with you. And I'm truly thankful for all the 109 experts because all of them are sharing so many things about themselves, about their experience, about anything around their lives. So what I will do now, I will give you, we still have a few minutes from this session. So I will use this time to share with you more experiences from the experts because Jane came from Portland, originally from Korea, who lived in Malaysia, and that's how we met, made interviews with the experts, and 12 of them was explaining their pivotal stories. So I would like to share more pivotal stories with you if you're still watching this broadcast. And from 2 p.m. we will have something very nice because there will be a connection between South Africa and Malaysia, and two storytellers will come on board and they will tell their stories. So watch these videos. I hope you will enjoy. First up is Mariam. Alan already told his story. I showed his video already. And Mariam is the wife that Alan was talking about, the love of his life. And I think they are an amazing couple. They will come up again today in the relationship taboo session. So please enjoy this video, and I hope you will like all the wisdom that she's sharing with you. I will just start the video right now from my top. Let me see where it is. So Mariam, where is your name? Here you go. All right, so let me see. So enjoy the video, and I will come back soon and share another video so that you can see more experts and more stories that you can learn from.
I think the three things are based on the strong woman that came before me. We cannot ignore our mothers and grandmothers that worked so hard for women to be where they are. The one thing is reading something that nobody else is reading, thinking something that nobody else is thinking, and doing something that no one else is doing. So I believe anything and everything, you have to try everything and anything, because if you don't, you will never know how successful you can be. And the third thing is always help another woman. Helping other women reach their goals and achieve their dreams is the most fulfilling experience that anyone can have. And that, I think, is a new unique quality, but it shouldn't be. Every one of us as women should have that quality. The day I was diagnosed with breast cancer on the 14th of May, 2019, my whole life changed. I had a paradigm shift. I was not going to let anything set me back. I was going to be and become the best version of myself, building and supporting women in the academy. I have since published books, articles, edited journals, received a series of awards, yet none of which would have ever been possible without the amazing women that came before me and worked with me to help us achieve this. The change or the shift was, for me, realizing and accepting that patriarchy is real, and I don't support it, and I stand up against it. Remembering that most people want you to do well in the workplace, but the moment you do better than them, they feel threatened. So those were my shifting moments in my life. I'm healthy and in remission right now. I would tell my 18-year-old self, you will get through the tough times. And do not be afraid to ask for help. And your mental and physical health are so important, they matter. Always speak your mind and be true to your principles and values. And finally, I would say to my 18-year-old self, continue to be kind and believe in all your dreams and the dreams of your sisters beside you, in front of you, and next to you. Yes, I am. This is my empowered voice.
I hope you like this one. I think she's amazing. She has an amazing experience and she shared it from her heart. And I really believe that these stories should be revealed. Once we had the plan with Jules Wong to make stories and make a book up about stories. And I'm really hoping that once we can make it happen, because I think without people speaking up, without people telling good and the bad and their stories, and without making that visible for everyone else, we don't really learn. So we need that share, we need that opening up so that you can learn from these experiences. Next up, there is someone very special for me. I met her through a friend, Mala, who is working at MyTech, and they are our strategic venue sponsors. And this lady is just an inspiration for me. She's also from South Africa, like Mala, and she is just an amazing person. So Dr. Anshu is someone who is inspiring a lot of people and who is fighting for people's rights and who is protecting women from abuse and anything else, because in South Africa there's a big issue with violence. So let me share her video. I will see it also for the first time because it was a last minute editing by Jane. She was so nice. She came to help me, and let me just search for that video and let's hear about empowerment from the person who is working in this field and who is doing so much for women in South Africa. So I introduce you Dr. Anshu Andayachi from South Africa.
Dr. Anju Parayachi, thank you for your time for this interview. You're a successful woman leader, the CEO at South African Technology Network, and a passionate advocate for women empowerment who co-founded the first South African NGO to help victims of domestic abuse in 1986. I feel honored to invite you to the Global Women Empowerment Summit to listen to your insights and plans around women empowerment. So,
Thank you very
Dr.
much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Parayachi, how have you become interested in women empowerment and domestic violence? What have you learned along the way of supporting women for more than 30 years?
Thank you for that question. Very interesting one indeed. My interest in this whole issue of domestic violence really started when I was undertaking my master's degree in criminology. And during that time, I identified specific reasons why children committed offenses or behaved in particular ways, especially young children under the age of 16, who we called juvenile offenders. So in studying these juvenile offenders, one of the most profound things that came out of the study was that many of these children came from homes where there was abuse, but they didn't understand that this was abuse. They would say things like, I didn't do my homework last night because I slept outside. And when I questioned in depth why they slept outside, they would say things like, my father beat my mother and us up and chased us out of the home. And that was the common thread that went through all of these children. It appeared as though either they were abused or their mothers were abused and they could do nothing about it. And as a result, much of their delinquent or offender behavior was a kind of manifestation of what was going on in their lives. And they would respond in the same way their dads responded to conflict or anger or something they didn't like. They would do the same. And they were at school as well. Teachers found them to be offensive, didn't like these children, treated them badly because they were troublemakers, considered troublemakers. And that is what prompted me to look further into what they meant by my dad beat my mother and beat us. It was something that was not known to me in my environment. I grew up in a family where I was the youngest of 3 children, the only daughter, was never treated differently from the boys, were given the same opportunities, grew up on a diet of community work and assisting the community. And I would never forget my late dad when I qualified and was the first person to get the PhD in criminology, first Black woman to get a PhD in criminology, which was on domestic violence, incidentally. He said to me, whilst I congratulate you, I also want you to know that the study is not worth anything if you can't put the recommendations into place. And so this is what prompted me and my colleague, Judge Pillay, to start the first advice desk for abused women. Judge Pillay, who was the previous UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, was at the same time, we met, of course, through our 2 young daughters in a lift club. We met after school waiting for our children to come home, and we talk about these issues and what we were doing and what we were studying. And both of us were then given scholarship, she to Harvard to do a PhD in human rights law, and myself to do my PhD in criminology. And I chose domestic violence as my subject and as subject matter, and she chose human rights. And we promised each other that when we get back, we will look at what what is happening and what we can do for the country. At that stage in the country, there was nothing. The word domestic violence hadn't even been coined. And no one knew what this was, and it was very much a hidden topic. So we started the first center from our homes. We would work day and night trying to assist women, etc. But there were just a few. In the first year, I think we had something like 135 cases, and we thought, oh, we could get this done in no time. and we'll sort this problem out. But what we didn't realize was what we were dealing with at that stage was only the tip of the iceberg, that women didn't speak about it, that those who spoke about it didn't want to be identified. They wanted all this information confidential. They just wanted to speak about it, and they didn't know where to go. There were no facilities. There was no law protecting them. There was actually nothing. And so Judge Pillay and myself at that stage, and she was the first woman judge, Black woman judge in the country, we decided that we would do something about this and started the Center for Domestic Violence. And it is now some 36 years old and still located at the what was then called the University of Durban-Westville, which is now called the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And this organization was responsible for training many other NGOs. We've written manuals for the police, social workers, the medical profession. We did work internationally on sexual harassment, etc. And we see this groundswell now of women, the Me Too campaign, etc., talking about this. And so I believe that our work, just looking at these figures that have come out now, I mean, it's world-wide crisis at the moment. And to know that 50% of the women, that the population of the world is made up by more women than men, and nothing is being done to save them. So we believe that something needs to be done, and women need to come together with men who believe in this, in this cause, to stop it, to stop violence, and give women the opportunity to do what they want to do.
Dr. Padachi, thank you for that answer. It was so powerful. So can you please now share about your activities and plans, including the plan you shared with Andrea to write letters to presidents in the world?
In and around 1988, 1989, one of the things that was happening in South Africa, that was pre-apartheid, no, post-apartheid, sorry, not 89. This was in the period 1996, when our great President Mandela had just taken office in 1994, and we were delighted with his taking over, and we knew that things would change in our country. And one of the things that was happening in the country at the moment, at that particular moment, was the fact that women had come from the rural areas to make a living in the cities. And oftentimes women would sleep on the streets rather than travel back home because transport wasn't available, etc. Whilst there was tremendous progress being made in the country, and President Mandela was doing everything in his power to make sure that the poorest of the poor got everything, there was only so much he could do. He was trying to get his cabinet in place and get reviewing what was happening and looking at the country, which was already bankrupt, and trying to reinvent what he thought was and put together his vision for this country. And so one of the projects that we at the Advice Desk identified was a project at the Durban City Station. At this railway station, women would sell their wares like baskets. They would make it come from the cities and at night from the rural areas and sleep there on the streets, cover themselves and sleep, and they would sleep in rows. And the women complained to us that at night, some of the men would come in, knew they were sleeping there, and it was all women, and they would rape them. And so what these women would do is they would take turns to sleep at the inns, so that it's not the same woman. And we just thought that was so horrifying, that kind of detail. And at that time, Judge Pillay was the president of an organization called Equality Now in New York, of which Jessica Neuwirth was the executive director. And we said to her, look, this was the problem. And she said, no, we've got to lobby this. So we lobbied our president, and we said to him that we think that, these women, they don't have places to stay. We understand the country is busy at the moment trying to get housing, etc., for the poor, but please give these women protection. they are making a living by selling these wares, etc., the baskets and whatever equipment they were selling or products they were selling. And he immediately responded and provided a mobile police station right outside where these women were sleeping at night. And we thought that was tremendous. And we believe that if presidents of the world can do something about this pandemic, like they're doing with COVID, I mean, everybody is following with COVID, with HIV, AIDS, governments came to the fore and were there to assist their countries, etc. And why not with this pandemic of domestic violence? And that's the question we ask. But in my discussions with Andrea, I suggested that we first look at what progress countries have made in the last 5 years with regard to equality of women or progress of women. And once we have those figures and statistics and some kind of information, we should use that as a kind of background information to lobby the presidents of the world so that they could deal with this issue of domestic violence as a collective rather than one at a time. And I understand that different countries will have different legislations, but if we produce this document and show it to presidents, they will see some countries have made tremendous progress with regard to women, the Nordic countries, etc. And then you would see other countries that have not made such progress. And the question would be why and what is it we can do? Because those are the people that we depend on. Those are the people we vote into power. And those are the people that need our votes. So we have the power in our hands to ensure that we can make a difference. And that is one way in which we can make a difference. So that is my proposal to this group of women who have taken the time to deal with this issue of the empowerment of women.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer, Doctor. And my next question is, what is your message for the global leaders out there who's trying to engage themselves in this issue of women empowerment?
Well, again, as I said, you know, there's a lot of talk going on, but there's no action. And what we are asking for is substantial action. There needs to be laws to protect women in countries where there aren't laws. There needs to be proper sentencing of people who violate these laws, and not just protect men who commit these offenses and say they will never do it again. The cycle of violence is unbelievable. If we do not stop it now, the next generation will do exactly the same and the same. And research over the years has shown that children who live in homes with violence will perpetuate this kind of value system. So if we don't stop it now, we're going to have a country of people who will, or countries of people who will be killing women. And these are the women that give birth to the nation. These are the women who produce these people. And also I want to say that women also need to take charge of how they bring up their young men as well, and not treat them differently from their daughters. So sometimes even women are their own worst enemies, and they argue that culture says this. Culture does not differentiate between who I am and who my brother is. It's we who decide that. We say we are different. We treat each other differently. So as long as women raise their children, and men, of course, who raise their children, but some cultures, men will not be raising children. In raising your children, ensure that those values are passed on to them, that they understand that there's no difference, except biological differences, between men and women, but our ambitions are the same. Our values are the same. We can do the same things that they can do. And I think that is what is very important. So whilst we ask presidents and leadership of countries to make that change, we need to have this groundswell, the tsunami of women around the world who demand this, because this is your right. You've got to access your right on your own. It's there, it's written. Someone wrote it. Someone said you have this. You know that you've requested this because there's no difference. So access it. The only way we can access it is to support each other. Do not put another woman down. And this is why I say women sometimes are their own worst enemies. We need to take women along. A good leader is a leader who creates other leaders. We're not going to be around forever. And so training young women, ensuring that young women can take this baton from us and move on is extremely important for change and for the future of our nations.
Yes, indeed, action is very. Dr. Anju Parayachi, thank you for your time for this interview. You are a successful woman leader, the CEO at South African Technology Network, and a passionate advocate for women empowerment who co-founded the first South African NGO to help victims of domestic abuse in 1986. I feel honored to invite you to the Global Women Empowerment Summit to listen to your insights and plans around women empowerment. So,
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Parayachi, how have you become interested in women empowerment and domestic violence? What have you learned along the way of supporting women for more than 30 years?
Who creates other leaders?
It began with a bold vision to build KL Metropolis, a development that would establish a new international trade and exhibition district in Malaysia, built in partnership with the government by NASA Group's property arm, NASA TTDI. The crown jewel of this grand vision is the Malaysia International Trade and Exhibition Centre, the preferred international destination for exhibitions and events. Like the fine gold and silver threads of the Songket weave that inspired its facade design,